There will be 5 people on the stage here, and I'm going to ask Art Barnaby to come up first and kind of introduce the panel, and then he'll be on stage with them. So, okay, Art's not going to introduce them. So I guess I'll just have you all come up then. Adrian's going to introduce them, and Adrian, I'll let you introduce yourself as well.
All right, is that working okay? Sounds like I'm getting a little bit of sound here anyway. Well, we appreciate the opportunity to spend a few minutes this afternoon. Other than, well, Art's even a weedy too, I guess, if you really think about it in terms of his farming operation. Just a little bit about myself. I'm Adrian Polansky, currently State Executive Director of the Farm Service Agency here in Kansas. It's sort of a rerun. Did that before. In between, I did have the opportunity to be Kansas Secretary of Agriculture, which I enjoyed immensely. I continue to go back to the farm, using up my vacation time to harvest and that sort of thing. So I can't quite kick the habit. Spend quite a bit of time there. I've had people ask me, you enjoy production agriculture and your business and so forth, why do you volunteer for these government roles? They're not, you don't necessarily hear a lot of people applauding government employees and saying great things about us. I just would point out one thing, just one item, just to kind of share why I'm interested in that. And it has to do with the prairie chicken issue that was visited a bit about yesterday and certainly visited about pretty much every day. But I did have an opportunity early on to work with the Fish and Wildlife Service in terms of production agriculture and how they were going to treat the CRP program. And as I think you know, in terms of production agriculture, as long as you have an NRCS conservation plan, which almost everybody has for years, you can continue to operate with that plan just like you have forever, ever since you've had it. If you're enrolled in CRP and your contract expires, you can break that out and plant wheat or corn or whatever you want. And that agreement holds for 30 years. I don't get a lot of press about that sort of a success. There's a lot of folks that make a lot of noise and get a lot of coverage. I haven't seen a whole lot of results from it. But I guess I wanted to explain why I've been involved in some of these things, because on occasion you can make a real difference for real people, in this case in agriculture. So I sleep a lot better at night knowing that I've made a contribution here and there. I want to just make a few opening comments, just a little bit about the farm economy, the farm safety net, and politics as it relates from the 80s to our current situation and how that relates to farm policy, at least from my perspective. We've, I think, learned a lot here at this conference over the last couple of days. One of the things that I've been following really close is that some of the numbers that we see, in my view, don't really tell us the whole story. If you look at 2013, there was only 36% of all farms that had farm debt. That seems really like a pretty good number. But if you look at farms that have over $100,000 worth of income, 50% of those farms in 2013 operated with debt. And if you look at farms that had $1 million worth of gross income, over 70% of those producers were operating with debt. That's a whole different story than looking at the numbers in aggregate, and I think there's some importance with that, particularly as we saw, those of us that saw Michael Taylor's presentation. Those numbers are still behind, but certainly 2014, when you look at the profitability of production agriculture, commodity agriculture in Kansas, dramatically different. And so I think it's something that we want to monitor. Iowa, about 6 weeks ago, had a meeting with their state secretary of agriculture, the financial community, the ag manufacturers supplying community, as well as with FSA. And a couple of things that I heard from that meeting kind of got my attention. One was a consensus in terms of corn and soybean operations in Iowa that none of their customers cash flowed on a cash basis, which obviously means either reduction in equity, using reserves to pay the bills, which is, I think, a dramatic change. Another comment that I understand was made that the average 1,500-acre corn and soybean farm in Iowa is projecting to lose $375,000 in equity this year, which means, to me, some are going to lose significantly more than that. And some of the numbers that we, read and hear about, it sounds like there's a lot of equity out in farm country, and debt's really not that big an issue. But I think if you dig a little bit deeper, and when you compare with the 80s, the burn rate now is dramatically different. And so if we have 2 or 3 or 4 more years of these kinds of numbers, I think it turns sort of our perspective around kind of significantly. I'm going to end there in terms of opening comments. One of the things that I've done in the past is was very active in wheat groups back a few years ago. I had the good fortune to chair the Kansas Wheat Commission as well as the board of directors of U.S. Wheat Associates, and had a chance to participate in market promotion around the world. Ron has had an opportunity to serve in that same capacity and has provided great leadership in the wheat industry across the country. So, Ron, would you like to make some opening comments?
We do the comments now or just introductions? Okay, Ron Suppes, Western Kansas farmer, and as Adrian said, I do have the privilege to represent you on the Kansas Wheat Commission and also with U.S. Wheat Associates. And in doing that, I've been able to travel the world a lot and visit a lot of customers, your customers. They're good customers. We sell probably 55% of our commodity, wheat, out of the country. So when I told my wife that I needed to come up here for this meeting, for this panel, she said, you better get up there. She wanted to apologize for not having me here for the rest of your seminar. She's in the hospital right now. She appreciates all your thoughts and prayers. She is getting better. I told her she didn't need to apologize for pulling me away because you guys would probably thank her for doing that. Anyway, what are you going to talk about, she asked. I said, well, there are just a few things that I think are really important. I need to lay them out for the people, and then if they want to discuss them, that'd be fine. She told me not to be too blunt because she said, you're not Ronald Trump. And being a quick thinker and fast on my feet, I started to retaliate and talk to her about comparisons between her and Mrs. Trump, but I caught myself being quick-witted and fast on my feet. Decided just to be still. She said, don't worry about it. People your age do that from time to time. You forget about what you're going to say. But she did say, if you do happen to find yourself forgetting, if Barry Flinchbaugh is there, say something about him because everyone will laugh. And the one thing I would say about Barry, he's a great friend, and the only problem he has, I know he's here somewhere. Now, down here, okay. For a long time he thought I was one of his students, and he had the misfortune of not having me as a student. But anyway, I possibly could have been another feather in his cap. Someone told me you were here. I looked up. I thought it was Colonel Sanders. But anyway. The first thing that I'd like to talk about, or have you think about, is the possibility of changing the term farm bill to something else. I think we've kind of worn that out. I'm thinking something along the line of the Food and Nutrition Sustainability Bill or something like that. And then we need to encourage people to realize that in order to have a sustainable food program, you need to have a good, strong farm program, or agriculture sector. So I'm thinking we need to try to look at something like that rather than what we've been doing. The other thing I need to talk to you about a little bit is crop insurance. In my part of the country, crop insurance is not just for the farmer. We're in western Kansas. The whole economy around our community is engulfed with agriculture. So when there's a bad year, everybody suffers. So in my opinion, crop insurance in that situation is more of a rural sustainability insurance. And the neat thing for the community is the farmer pays for that, at least 40% of it. And they only have to kick in 60. A third thing, this is the other thing my wife told me not to do. Don't tell them you're going to have 3 or 4 items and then forget about the last one or forget what it was, because she said you'll end up like the guy down south. And then you'll end up buying a new pair of glasses, and we can't afford those, and they won't make you look any smarter anyway. So the third thing would be FMD and MAP. These are the market access program and the foreign market development program that we use, that Adrian's very familiar with, to do our international trading. There's like a total of $234 million between the two funds, and all the commodities plus some other outfits vie for those funds. It depends on what kind of job you do as far as your programs overseas and how much money you put into that as far as how much you will get back. Well, U.S. Wheat over the years has put in like $1 of your checkoff money, and the return's been between $2.50 and $3. So it's a good deal. But the problem is the fund is getting attacked, as everything else is, and more commodities are becoming involved in vying for that fund. In fact, I think some of the livestock producers probably received some funding out of that a year or so ago. So my proposal is that we need to get the other commodity groups together. We need to talk to these guys, which are the growers of all the organizations. And I know they've already been working on this, but that fund needs to be increased. $240 million or $235 million, whatever the amount is like a marketing error when you do the budget for the U.S. So it's a rounding error. It's not a big amount of money, but the efficiencies there are tremendous. We've been told that for every dollar that's spent on international trade, the economy in the U.S. receives $23. Now, the farmer doesn't get that. They may get 50 or 60 cents a bushel out of that. So that means there are other individuals and groups within the U.S. that are receiving the other 20-some dollars. So we need to find out who those groups are and get them to work with us in encouraging bigger amount of money there. Thank you.
I'm David Schemm. Ron says he's from western Kansas. I guess I'll marginally accept that. I'm from Sharon Springs, Kansas. And for those of you who know where that is, it's about 16 miles from the Colorado border. So I'm truly from western Kansas. I returned back to the farm in 1993. It was probably a time when you're not supposed to be returning back to the farm. Many farms had suffered through the 80s and were trying to start to get back on their feet. And so it was a tough time for me to try to transition back into farming on my dad's operation there. So I started there, and I started trying to diversify my crop, my portfolio there. Started doing some custom work, especially in the spraying area, and was able to build the operation. Became involved in Kansas wheat. Got onto the board of directors, and then started through the officer leadership team at Kansas Association of Wheat Growers, COG. As I was transitioning through that officer team, as I was vice president and then president of COG, I was on the National Association of Wheat Growers board, and I was chair of their domestic policy committee. and I happened to be the chair when we first started discussing the Farm Bill and some of our targets and some of our expectations that we wanted from it. The neat thing that I saw about that was that there was outreach efforts between commodities to work together. We had several letters that we sent out pointing out things that we agreed on and could move forward upon. And that's one thing I think, as we've seen through several presentations today, that we've got to continue to emphasize. We've got to reach across the lines and make sure we build those coalitions as we start to look towards a new Farm Bill. Absolutely critical. But I think there's also challenges that we deal with that, and I think we see those same challenges within our own state and also clear across this country, and I call them regional differences. I remember when I was serving as a chair of that committee, I got in a discussion one time with one of my committee members from Ohio, and at that time he looked at me and he said, "I'm paying for your crop insurance." He said, "I'm paying all the premiums, I'm not collecting." It was kind of interesting, though. After 2012, he came back to me and said, "I really like my crop insurance." And so I think what we look is sometimes we've got to understand our regional differences and not just be looking forward based upon what last year's experiences are. I think that was some of the challenges that we were dealing with as we looked at the current Farm Bill. We were dealing with some very high prices. Farmers were starting to make some money and doing well, and so it became a hard point to argue as we went forward. As I look forward towards this next Farm Bill, many times I say what helps to prompt one of the best farm bills is have an ag economy suffering and a general economy doing well. It does. It's the, I guess, the harsh reality of that. I don't wish upon it, but as I looked at weather outlooks and look at price volatility, I think there's some definitely ways that we're going to have to look at as a producer, as I do, ways to be able to manage our risks as we go forward. And if we don't have crop insurance, if we don't have a farm bill as a way to manage risk, there will be other ways to manage risk. I look at my own operation. I have a diversified, I grow corn, I grow milo, I grow wheat. I have just very limited irrigation, very little irrigation. I'm primarily a dryland operation. My corn and my milo, I can make good money. My wheat, I can make good money. But if I lose the crop insurance side of that, I would probably no longer grow dryland corn. Now, argument can be made that I should not be growing dryland corn out in my part of the country. But if I stop growing dryland corn, I know a lot of my other fellow producers out in the area will too. Is that going to affect anything? Yeah. If you haven't noticed, drive through western, southwest Kansas at night and see all the lights out there comprised of cattle feeding operations there. We support a big industry out there, and if we suddenly start growing corn, I'm concerned that can have an impact out there. So that's some dynamics. I think sometimes we've got to be careful as we go forward saying whether one area should be growing a crop or not. The crop insurance allows for a risk tool there for us. So that's an area I have of concern. Back to me, as I got done with the committee chair of the National Association of Wheat Growers there, I finished up my tenure at the officer leadership team of COG, and with a lot of consultation with my family, made the decision to go ahead and run for the national office of the in the National Association of Wheat Growers. And I was elected into that, and this is my second year. I am now serving as treasurer of that organization. Somewhat trepidatiously, because as I look through ahead, I see that I'm probably going to be serving pretty close as the president of that organization as we start to look at another farm bill. A lot of concerns I have there going forward there. And we really need our ag community as a whole to make sure that we're reaching across lines and working together to go with a strong single voice. And so I guess one of my main points, I want to make sure that we all reach out to each other and that we're all making sure we're involved. If we see as the ag economy is vital to us, we've got to be reaching out to each other and communicating and talking. It's not to say that we're not going to have differences, but I know there is a commonality between those differences that we can reach. As I point to the Ohio director that one time told me he didn't need crop insurance, he's paying for mine, and then tells me, no, I do like that crop insurance. So I guess that's all the points I have for right now.
Thank you. One thing that he didn't add was about a year ago, NOG did a bylaw change, and instead of having him transfer from being secretary treasurer to being the second vice president, we facetiously nominated him to be treasurer for life. So he's going to continue in that role. But seriously, he's taken on the bookkeeping responsibilities or the treasurer responsibilities for the second year, and we do appreciate it because he does have a gift for looking at the details, and I think he has served NOG and you farmers very well. My name is Paul Pinner, by the way. I'm from Hillsboro, Kansas, north of Wichita. And I'm past president of National Association Wheat Growers. I am also past president of Kansas Association Wheat Growers, and so I've been involved with policy for quite some time. One thing I want to just reiterate, there's a lot of things we can discuss later on as we address questions, but NOG is a federation of 22 states, of which Kansas is an association member of it. It's a grassroots-based organization, and we do take your desires and your wishes, your interests at heart, and we take them seriously. When you plug into an association like Kansas Wheat Growers, we do listen to what those resolutions are that comes down and get forwarded on to the NOG office and to the board of directors there. That said, we do have an overview, which we have to bring all the interests of the 22 member states together and then formulate policy on how we're going to enact legislation or represent you on the Hill. I just wanted to change focus just a little bit, and then Dr. Coble, I really appreciated the slides that you had put up there. I don't know if you noticed that 1991 was one of those watershed years where those two graphs started moving apart. And that I thought that was kind of enlightening to see that already back in '91, and to see how that disparity, that disconnect, has been moving further and further. Having said that, your other question dealt with the issue of, okay, what are the commodity groups going to do in the future? How are they going to be? Will they survive? One issue is about engaging the environmental groups that are dealers. And I've been fortunate since I'm now past president. I'm not taking the lead role in a lot of these other functions, but I attended the Monarch Butterfly Collaborative Working Group Steering Committee meeting that was held in Minneapolis just earlier this week, and there was a lot of these groups that were attending that meeting. And one of the positives that I took away, because I didn't know what I was going to get into, but we were able to, as commodity groups, the corn was there, soybeans were there, and we were there, and then of course Farm Bureau was there, some state members. We were able to moderate some language that was taken on to adjust the language of the objectives and the mission statements and the core values, and also to be able to help fashion some of the messaging that we're going to be working on to deal with the monarch butterfly issue. So I think it's going to be very important in the future. I know it's not the essential part, which is basically policy and representing the commodity groups for the farmers, but this is going to be an increasing role. How are we going to pass farm legislation if a farm bill does come forward in the future? We need to be thinking about this and how we're going to adjust and adapt, and how we're going to gauge people that may have a little different view than we. So maybe you can think about that, chew on that. If you want to ask questions, fine. But I think be prepared to go back to your commodity group and engage them and see if there's some ways that we can actually engage and have a positive effect to make sure that agriculture does not have to be overburdened with a lot of regulations that can come down, just like we're seeing with waters of the U.S. and some other issues. I'll just leave it right there at this time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys, and we appreciate you agreeing to be part of the panel. The purpose of this session, too, is to turn this into an open forum and get the feedback from people who are actually in production agriculture. Real quickly, I would like to thank the Kansas wheat growers who joined in with us on this particular project. I don't know if Rich mentioned it or not, but we had some grant money to pull this conference off, and that's how Keith got his airfare paid, and so we appreciate that. Real quick, comment on the Ohio farmers saying they're paying premiums for Kansas. Not true. It's just simply not true. And it's something that I hear it all the time, that it benefits us and not the rest. Taxpayers might have sent some money here, but not Ohio farmers. That simply did not happen. Ron, I was curious, you said that Flinchball keeps trying to claim you as a student.
Yes.
Well, I have the opposite. He tells everybody that I am not his student, and he makes it very clear. So, we're open. Who's got the first question? Or else I'm going to have to ask him. I don't have a good one. Go ahead.
I guess I got the mic here. So there's something we've been very concerned of. Again, one of the things that we've had discussions already with our group is that aspect of the pool, what the dynamics of the pool will turn into if we do not effectively manage that subsidy. And in reference, basically, and I think it was maybe Dr. Barnaby, you alluded to it yesterday or talked about it yesterday in your presentation, but basically the ones that are not having any risk or losses and not collecting that are going to be the ones that if it just becomes to a point where we make it so that they no longer consider it an effective risk management tool, they'll drop out of that pool. And so suddenly you raise the risk of that overall pool there, and it becomes much less attractive to our underwriters to step in there. I think your idea has merit. I think it is a possible. We need to look at it, study it, see what it would look like across the board there. But I think it definitely has merit to maintain the pool viability of it, so to say.
One thing that I would add there is, I guess I'm one of those people that I don't like to start out a negotiation by proposing something less. I think I would have a real issue with that. I guess, a little in terms of my background, I've got a son that I farm with and daughter-in-law and their 3 grandkids. They're growing up on the same farmstead that I did. And had it not been for Congress enacting various pieces of legislation, including improving crop insurance, including FMHA guaranteed loans, disaster payments, a CRP program to stabilize land prices that not only made a huge difference to save a lot of producers, but saved a lot of financial institutions and so forth. And I think back to the presentation earlier, we seem to have a more complicated legislative situation, and I guess I would encourage people to look very carefully at people that are making the decisions on our behalf. Rural America, agriculture has always been represented by conservative members of Congress, regardless of the party. But they were pragmatic. And, the scenario, I think it was mentioned here that we had this last farm bill discussion in what appeared at the time to be relatively good times, which provides some challenges. But in the 80s, we had pragmatic conservative members of Congress and members of the Senate who saw a need to stabilize what was a really crisis situation. I guess one of the questions I think we need to ask is, have we added so many ideologues to Congress that the pureness of their political view is more important than the future of production agriculture in this country, in this state, and the rural part of the country? For that matter, are they so pure and ideological that that they're insensitive to those that do need a SNAP program in times of their lives where they have, lost their jobs or whatever. I guess what I'm leading to is what David mentioned earlier. Among those of us in agriculture, I think we need to work at creating a climate where there's an understanding that rural American agriculture is not the only sector of the U.S. That from time to time has some needs, and we need to, I think, promote working with those folks as well. I think certainly to start with, we got to work within agriculture in rural America, but there's a whole lot of more world out there.
I was just going to add real quick on any reduction in the government share of the premium being paid. I suggested that if they're going to make that reduction on wheat growers, it should also apply to the CAT contracts. The CAT contract is 100% subsidized, primarily with fruits and vegetables, and many of those carry more than $1 million, in some cases multi-million dollars of liability. Got my hand slapped with that one, told them I'm going to break my pencil and stop writing. Turns out there's quite a few cherries in Michigan that are covered with CAT contracts. So you'd be surprised who you can tick off by something that seems perfectly logical to me. If we're going to reduce the premium subsidy, I like to call it premium share, out here on wheat guys, then it should be across the board and apply to everyone else. Not that I'm suggesting that should be a solution or that should be a negotiating position, but for those who have suggested that. More questions? Well, the Senate or the ranking member now is Senator Stabenow from Michigan, and she has cherries in her state. So, yeah, and I like cherries. Cherries are very good. I eat lots of cherries. I like cherries on top of my root beer floats I get at Sonic. Questions? Oh, there's got to be something out there you guys are worrying about. You bet.
Just a quick follow-up. I 100% agree with what Adrian said. I think when we start to look at this next farm bill, absolutely cannot come out the gate saying, okay, we're willing to take an across-the-board cut on crop insurance. That is just absolutely a death wish there. We've got to start out making sure we maintain the full current funding that it's at. Exactly, ask for the increase and then you negotiate down to the current level. So we've got to do that going forward.
Well, I want to thank Art and Michael Taylor for the assistance in working with Farm Service Agency and USDA in terms of all the educational programs that dealt with the new Farm Bill choices. I thought it was an excellent cooperative partner type effort, and so I wanted to publicly thank them for the outstanding work that they did in that regard.
I would just reiterate what David and the rest of the panelists were talking about in terms of, farmers, agriculture. Whenever there's been a crisis in government as far as the budget is concerned, we've always stepped up to the plate, and we've been willing to do our share. How many times have we done that, and then the rest of the economy doesn't follow? And so it's time for us to negotiate from a position of strength instead of being willing to just give something away.
Go ahead.
Guys, what's possible or not possible with you, how soon can we do that?
A lot of things are possible and not too soon. The government, from what I've been told, a lot of government hurdles, not only our government but theirs, to get through. We've always had the opportunity to sell medical and food to Cuba. We just couldn't bank it, and I don't think that'll be in the near future either. But we've got a lot of different groups working on that, and I would say it's about time that we did get something done. There are 11 million people there, so you're not looking at a big market, but you're looking at a close market. And when I say close, it's transportation. There's no reason for Canada to be floating around us and selling, for example, wheat down there. So to answer your question again, we are working on it, but don't hold your breath. It'll take a while.
But at least the door is open now so that work can progress, which I think is, from my perspective, long overdue. And having had the opportunity with some of the folks here to visit Cuba with Dr. Flinchbaugh a few years ago, it is a real opportunity, and it took some, in my view, a real leadership to make that decision that other presidents haven't had the will to move forward on something that is not only important to agriculture here, but long-term extremely important to the people in Cuba.
The time that Dr. Flinchbaugh took us down there, there was an eye-opener, and then I was able to go there a time about 4 years after that, and there was even a big change then. The only tour buses I didn't see down there were those from the U.S., Australia, Britain. Tourists were there, just not the U.S., so we were only shooting ourselves in the foot, and we need to get with it. I would mention something else since we have, as you called it, a lull. Talk a little bit about the WTO and Doha. We started working on that in, I say we, all the countries involved, 2001. We've been working on that for, 14 years, haven't gotten very far, gotten a few things done, gotten ourselves penalized with the cotton case. I don't know that that's positive. But it appears to me that what we should be doing is working more on bilateral trade agreements and quit working so much on these big ones. Because in my opinion, for example, during that period of time, Canada has completed well over 120 bilateral agreements, while our country and our government, I think, is at 14 or 17 or something. My opinion is if you get enough bilaterals, pretty soon you're going to have a Doha, a WTO. So I think we need to get off that kick and get to working with individual countries.
In addition to that issue, this is talking about trade. There's an econometric study that's been commissioned by the U.S. Wheat, and I think it's by University of Iowa, or is it Iowa State? I'm a little off on that. But anyway, there's four countries that have enough of a trade barrier with tariffs that is costing the U.S. agricultural producer major dollars. And in terms of the total amount, it's the hit is about $1 billion for the United States farmer. And so having said that, it's really important that we do negotiate with some of these countries, China and India and Turkey, and I think what was the other one, Indonesia. Those four countries were the ones that were the major players. China obviously is a big player in that, and we need to move forward on that. Otherwise, we're going to continue to pay for it. While at the same time, we have countries on this TPP negotiation. They're insisting that we reduce domestic subsidies, which basically now is crop insurance on the American producer. And so that's really important that we get something equitable signed and stated, because otherwise we're the ones that are losing out.
Funny you mentioned that they want to penalize us again. That seems to be the popular thing with Doha and WTO, especially with the developed nations. They're supposed to give up. The other countries are supposed to gain, and that's kind of what's been happening. Give you an example. A lot of countries every country I've been to, they tell me no subsidies. Well, I haven't found that to be true in any country. For example, now China. If you were growing wheat in China, they're going to guarantee you $10 a bushel. Doha's not doing anything about that. In India, it's $9.50, and in Thailand, it's $9. So, but those underdeveloped countries, nothing seems to happen. Brazil is supposed to buy a certain quantity of wheat each year. They're not doing it, but yet we're subsidizing them through cotton payments. because we had something out of line in one of the farm bills. So what I've been telling these guys is we don't want to give any more. We've given enough. That's not the problem. The other countries are still subsidizing, whether it be by rail or whether you're in Australia and you're growing sorghum to go to a feedlot and the price is really good, but they don't allow other grains to come into the country. That's a subsidy to the farmer. At the time I ran across that, it was worth $2 a bushel to them compared to my price. So when they tell me they don't get a subsidy, I don't know about that.
A question over here?
Yes. Oh, it definitely affects the price. Okay. She says even though we're diversified operators, we have various crops, but how concerned are we with regards to China as being the big player as it reduces its currency valuation? And is that a big concern? Yes, it is. Absolutely. It does reduce the price of commodity that we receive. I don't know if you remember that week. It's not very long ago when that happened, and markets did take a hit, and of course then we had the crop report come out. Would you like to comment on that? Go ahead.
I'm certainly not an expert on currency values, but I certainly was exposed to that back in the 80s. The right button. I'm certainly not an expert about currency values, but I certainly was exposed to some of the variability in traveling around the world when, there was a certain period of time there where happened to be in Argentina and they had $1,000 bills and $100 bills at the same time. I mean, that's how rapidly inflation was going on, and that's certainly one of the challenges with the market now in terms of soybeans and Brazil is the currency relationships. But I think we've got to be a little bit careful in terms of China, for example. At least from my understanding, we've really wanted them to let their currency float for quite some time. And it was probably artificially high. So we've got to, I think, we'd be a little, cognizant of some of those things. And then in addition to that, the Fed's action over the last number of years here, someone else might say that had something to do with the value of the dollar relative to their currency. So I guess what I'm trying to say, this is a really complex issue, and we need to be really careful. It's certainly an important issue, and we need to deal with it. But we've got to be a little bit careful in how we approach it because we need a little flexibility here as well in terms of our monetary policy. So it's one of those things that as an old farm boy, I don't know that I'm smart enough to talk about it, other than I know there's a lot of complexity.
I guess the one area I'd speak to is just in reference to China in general. I get a little bit concerned sometimes of what their overall strategy is and how that affects our markets back here and our plans back here. Looking out in my area of the state, I know here a year and a half ago, Milo was trading at a very large premium. And I know for sure that in my area there was producers receiving 80 to 90 cent premium over corn, which is just absolutely unheard of. I mean, that just doesn't occur. And what concerns me is, as a producer, is you start to try to plan into the future and to strategize your risk management decisions and what crops you should go. I know that there was a lot of producers in my area that responded by planting Milo instead of corn this year. They looked at the lower costs of Milo, but they also were looking very much at the marketing program that was going on with China, and that huge premium was there. Well, now that premium has started disappearing very quickly. The demand has for the most part dried up, and now we're trading at about a neutral status to corn right now. And we have a lot of Milo out there right now as compared to corn right now in my part of the state. So it would be very much nice from a producer sense that we had a much more stable market there versus sometimes this volatile market and a government that gets involved with the policies to try to manipulate it.
Other questions?
Speak a little bit about the export-import banks and how you feel that's going to
That's not an area that I have a high level of expertise in, but my understanding is that most countries have a similar operation, if that's the right terminology, or similar function. And I guess I would be one to say that it's extremely important for the U.S. to continue to have that export-import bank. I think it makes a lot of difference for a lot of our business opportunities. And trade is, as we've already mentioned here several times, critically important to this country. I don't think we want to do anything, frankly, that would have a negative impact in regard to that. Other questions? One thing I just would circle back around. I mentioned that meeting in Iowa, and I don't want to be the person that's yelling fire in terms of the farm economy. But on the other hand, I think we need to be very realistic. In the 80s, I can speak for myself, but I think that's the way it was with everyone. Next year will be better, and it got worse. I thought, nah, next year will be better, and it got worse. If you start figuring out and looking at, and crop insurance is absolutely vitally important. But if you're looking at a $3 corn price that you're basing your 75 or 80% revenue protection on, you're guaranteeing a pretty darn big loss for most people. So there's some other things going on here that I think we better start thinking about. In Iowa, for example, they had ended their ag mediation program. Fortunately, here in Kansas, we got forest here today. We still have that opportunity here. But I'm going to, our FSA loan volume last year in Kansas was a record. I mean, and that includes the 80s. It was a record. It's going to end up 34% higher in this fiscal year. And I can, go on and talk about a number of other things, but I'm concerned we're not taking this serious enough, because we've already saw Michael's chart there in her session, and look at the 5 or 6 years before on the graph and what happened in 2014. For most folks, 2015 is going to add another year of that, and you add another 2 or 3. I mean, I'm going to be hopeful that El Nino dries up the Australian wheat crop or something, but unless something like that happens, I'm not seeing where we've got a real opportunity to see a big turnaround in commodity prices anytime soon. And, I, as well, hear all this about, the land that was purchased in the last several years, it was all cash. Well, it wasn't all cash. FSA loaned made a lot of farm ownership loans. I can guarantee you those weren't cash. And Farm Credit financed a lot of those, and the bankers financed a lot of those. And if you start dropping equity, I can remember what happened to me in my case. One year I thought I was fine. Everything was fine. All I needed was another $10,000 more the next year. And then I found out when I came in that wasn't exactly all fine. Not much of a change at all. That all of my equipment was all of a sudden worth a lot less. The land was worth less. And things didn't work out so well. And those things happen, from my personal experience, they happen pretty quick. So I guess I would encourage farm groups and others to start thinking about, is there anything that we can do to be proactive? I'm not sure, I know I don't have the answers to what that is. But if we wait another 2 years and we do nothing in terms of planning how we deal with the financial impact and the additional land that's going to be for sale, I'm certainly not here, like I said, I'm not trying to yell fire, but this is serious, folks, and I don't think we better ignore it.
Just to couple of comments that I've heard here over the past several months is in a discussion with another producer. We were talking about the low prices, and his comment was, well, one thing about low prices is they'll weed out the inefficient producers. And I looked at him and I said, no, we pretty well got rid of all the inefficient producers. It will weed out the less efficient producers. But producers are pretty efficient right now. So the other thing I hear is that there's a few producers in our area that are very financially stable. And when I start hearing them say, you know what, I don't think I'm just gonna leave the land idle next year because there's way too much risk and it'd be less risk involved if I just didn't grow anything. That concerns me too, because that's not an efficient producer there either. He's not growing anything.
Other questions?
I'd like to second your comment about mislabeling of the farm bill. Really, it should be the Food Security Act. Political capital we have lost by referring to that group as the farm bill. It's the Food Security Act is what this nation needs to be worried about. And that includes SNAP and crop insurance and all those things that are included in it. I'm afraid I second your concern with that misnomer.
And I think your point's well taken, although it's the agency I work for now has been Farm Service Agency for 20 years, and a lot of you all probably still refer to us as ASCS, and a lot of farm bills have been called a lot of different things, most of the time not a farm bill, but we all still refer to it as a farm bill. It's easy to change the title, but it's a lot harder for all of us to start referring to it as something different. I just would point that out, but I think your point's well taken. It's
We're in control of that, though, you and I.
To a small degree.
We can learn to call
There
it
you go.
something.
That's true. That's true. The question, I think, is what's behind the effort that was mentioned as well this morning about breaking apart the food portion of the, whatever we're going to call this bill for right now, be the farm bill, from the agriculture piece and rural development piece. I'm sure there's a number of different. It depends on which group of people you're talking about, is, in my opinion, what they were motivated by. My guess is there's a certain element, and they were in one of those boxes or two we saw a little while ago, that don't want either one. They don't want the food piece, and they don't want the farm piece. They don't want to have any of it. So one of the best strategies, if that's what you want to do, and it takes the coalition of the two, of the rural folks and some of the urban folks to pass it, how's the best way to kill it? Split it apart, or at least dramatically impact what is left behind. And I'm sure there's other elements with other goals that want to do that for other reasons. And I think there are some, in agriculture that, are concerned about the image of the Farm Bill, again, having as large a budget exposure when a lot of that is going to non-agriculture programs, thinking that if it was separated, that we would no longer have to explain all of that. The problem with that is, and the reality, and Dr. Flinchbach can explain this better than I can and most anybody else that I know about, but it's critical to have that coalition. It's critical for the food folks, which was pointed out this morning, which I hadn't really thought about that much, but they need some farm state Senate votes for that SNAP program, and we need a heck of a lot of urban votes to pass the Farm Bill. And so I think there's a whole number of reasons and goals in mind, but that's my take on it.
I would very much second. When we visited several of the offices in D.C., when some of that discussion was starting to come, the feedback that we got from those offices that were espousing that idea was that actually they thought it would help to move the farm portion of that bill forward, that the SNAP programs were way more contentious at that time, and that was a way to move it forward. Adrian is exactly right. I know the ag groups as a whole came together and said, no, don't do this. That was still a strong coalition there. They were very sensitive on that. In our discussion, we realized, speaking to some of those offices that were trying to espouse that idea, you might be successful this time, but you will be the doom of it for sure in the future. And we're not even sure it will be successful this time, so don't go down that route. So I know from ag groups, they got a responding, no, don't do that.
There was one anecdotal story that occurred during that time when they were attempting to split them apart. Another member was wanting to include language in that would require drug testing for farmers in order to get the program payments. And Congresswoman Rosa DeLauro, she's a very astute liberal, but very supportive ag woman. She said, if you do that, then she said, I will require. Let me correct this. The statement was about requiring welfare recipients to pass drug tests before they could receive the money. And then she insisted, she says, I will require then farmers that would be drug tested to qualify for payments. And that essentially basically was, they were successful in starting to make a split between liberals and conservatives on the Farm Bill legislation. And that was really unfortunate, because here commodity groups were really trying to work together and try to build a coalition, and these other groups are working at cross purposes to defeat it.
Last question. One final one.
One more. Yeah, the question is, as I heard it, has to do with wheat gluten and gluten-free diets and what kind of impact that's having on the wheat market domestically as well as internationally. So, Paul, you want to take that?
Yeah, statistically, 0.6% of the population in the United States are sensitive, diagnosed sensitive. And but my understanding is the last study that I read was 30% of the millennials have reduced their intake. That's in the United States. Now, you talk about this gluten issue exported. I don't think that's the case.
No, I don't think it is the case at all. I think they're not affluent enough there in most of those countries to worry about something like that. But you say 0.6% or 1%. By the time you figure, though, that that's in a family, that may go up to 5% if those people aren't being fed gluten just because of the one person. So what we're doing here at the Wheat Innovation Center, we have a project right now that they're studying this cellulosic problem and trying to come up with the negative proteins that are in gluten to see if those can be eliminated. And they are making some great progress. It's not going to be a big market for a wheat producer, but it is something that will help the general public with the idea of gluten and whether it should be eaten or not.
Well, thank you all. We appreciated the opportunity. Appreciated the opportunity to. Did I turn that off again? Okay. No, I just wanted to thank everybody for their attention and also for the questions. I think we are, I guess, and I want to thank Kansas State and this conference. I think is outstanding. I've learned a lot, and I'm sure everyone here has. So very appreciative of that. So we'll close with that.
We appreciate you.